In a recent episode of Jordan Peterson's podcast, American athlete Riley Gaines shared her experiences as a female athlete and discussed the issue of trans men and women's participation in women's sports. Gaines is a highly accomplished swimmer, having won 5 SEC championships and being a 12-time NCAA All-American. She has first-hand experience competing against a male and has witnessed the injustice and infringement on female athletes' performance, health, and mental health. The discussion also touched upon effective leadership, and Gaines emphasized the importance of communication in aligning personal goals with team goals. However, effective leadership for women in sports can be particularly challenging due to gender differences in communication and conflict resolution. Women tend to be more moody and less receptive to constructive criticism than men, while men are more likely to use overt conflict resolution strategies, while women may resort to covert strategies like gossip. The conversation then shifted to the topic of sex segregation in sports, and the need for it to be based on differential vulnerability and performance. Areas where biological differences are germane to performance should be sex segregated, while areas where women are sexually vulnerable should also be sex segregated. Gaines also discussed the immense sacrifices required to become a high-level swimmer, such as giving up on social events, relationships, and even missing out on funerals of loved ones. The issue of transgender athletes in women's sports was also discussed, with Leah Thomas being a specific example. Thomas's sudden success in women's events raises concerns about fairness and transparency in competition. However, Gaines argued that Thomas's transition to female swimming is unfair and raises questions about motivations, as Thomas was a mediocre male swimmer, ranked 462nd nationally. This demonstrates entitlement and selfishness rather than a desire for fair competition. The podcast also touched upon the mishandling of a tie for a trophy and the heartbreak at NCAA swimming competition. Gaines discussed the betrayal and lack of privacy in a unisex locker room, where officials failed to protect privacy and did not inform athletes of the unisex locker rooms. Additionally, there was a discussion of the protests that occurred during a speech by a former athlete, where university officials failed to condemn the violence and instead applauded the protesters. Gaines emphasized the importance of bravery in the face of violence and oppression, but also pointed out that reacting with violence and intimidation shows a lack of substantial argument and can backfire. Finally, the discussion touched upon discrimination against women in sports and the physical differences between men and women, arguing that women should not compete against giant men in their own sports.